Mr. Bertie went away to do his bit the other day. With a smile on his lips and his lieutenant pips upon his shoulder, bright and gay. As the train moved out, he sang, "Remember me to all the birds." Then he wagged his paw and went away to war, shouting out these pathetic words. Goodbye, goodbye, wipe a dear baby dear from your eye. Though it's hard to part, I know.
My name is Connor DL.
My name is Connor O'Donnell and my nickname is Cod.
My name is Evie Gale and I don't have any nicknames.
My name is Emily Gilmore and I'm 15 years old.
My name is Robbie Denham and my nickname is Bob.
My name is Holly Lech. Some of my friends call me Holly Dolly. My hobbies are hockey, cooking, listening to music, stuff like that.
My hobbies are playing rugby and playing guitar and drawing.
I enjoy playing football all the time because that's what I'm good at.
My hobbies are horse riding and hockey.
Most weekends I just like to go out with my friends.
My hobbies are playing Xbox.
If I could describe myself in 3 words, it would be optimistic, happy and outgoing.
I describe myself as funny, casual and laid back.
Hard working, cool maybe, and nice.
Optimistic, funny and intelligent.
Lazy, annoying and excitable.
Caring, slightly vain and happy.
Up to your waist in water, up to your eyes in sludge.
When we started travelling around Ypres and places around it, everywhere you went there would be a cemetery or a monument.
It was unbelievable. Loads of white crosses, headstones, all remembering people that fought.
Oh, 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 it's a lovely war, it's a lovely war. To be a soldier, eh? Oh, it's a shame to take the pain. As soon as rebellion's gone, we feel just as heavy as lead. But we never get up to the sergeant brings the breakfast up to bed. Oh, 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 it's a lovely war.
The trenches are important because like they're still there, so that's like, it's kind of like a memorial to the soldiers.
We got to go in them and it was just a horrible feeling to know that people were like living in them. Back in the war you would have spent like almost every minute worrying about dying.
The things that were most terrifying about the trenches were the fact that you could drown in the mud and your friends were beside you dying, getting eaten by rats, and you could get diseases and everything.
You got a trench foot, which is pretty much when the trench was just so wet your feet would start rotting inside your shoes.
And you weren't allowed to go to sleep until your sergeant said, so you could have been up 3 days in a row fighting and not getting a chance to sleep.
I think it felt probably quite terrifying. I can't even imagine what it would be like.
When you think about the trenches, you think they're going to be like miles apart, but then you see them and it's like a couple meters in between. And nowadays you've got like the whole remote control thing where you can be like safely in a different country and you're just like bombing them, but there you were actually in the war and you didn't know what could happen next. It was pure mayhem.
Both troops will have experienced similar situations. The Germans might have had different types of trenches, but they would have been death and blood around them still.
Well, if you ask me, I would say that before the Prime Minister and that, and all the colonels, they've sent people through war. I think they should experience a little bit to like for themselves, you know, experience what they're going to be sending people through and see like how they like it.
If the people weren't too bothered about a cause, whereas the Prime Minister really was, that's just one view against thousands. So I believe that the majority of the population should decide whether we go to war or not.
Lovely war. Oh, we want 3 eggs and ham, and we got plum and apple jam. Come fast, Richard.
Well, at the top of the Church of Messine, you could see for miles, you could just see big fields. But like, the more the man told you about the history around the place, the more you understood that Hitler was on one side fighting with the Germans and saving his friends, and you got Churchill on our side and he's sitting there shooting the Germans too. And it's quite mental, because you think if like maybe somebody had killed Hitler or somebody killed Churchill, the whole world could be different nowadays.
From the very top of the church you can see Plug Street, which was the place that the British and the Germans called a truce, and they went out to play football together.
It would be kind of hard to work out why they would just randomly start playing a game of football when the day before they were fighting. I think people would rather be playing football than fighting.
Oh, 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 it's a lovely war. Up to mighty London came an Irishman one day. As the streets are paved with gold, sure everyone was gay, singing songs of Piccadilly.
We walked through where the Battle of the Somme was and saw the landscape as it would have been then.
50,000 people were killed on the first day of the Battle of Somme, and that's 7 times the population of Dunbar.
90% of the soldiers that went over the top to go and attack the Germans were killed.
Losing like 9 out of 10 of my friends would just be horrible, and I can't even like begin to imagine what it would have been like.
There's a story that when the German soldiers were shooting British soldiers, they were actually crying because they just didn't want to do it.
I can't think of any circumstances that I would want to kill somebody. I just couldn't.
When we got to Highland Memorial to remember the Scottish soldiers, it says, "It's good to have friends on the day of battle." I mean, it seems like a really nice phrase, but if you think about it, you could have had those friends for half an hour, even 10 minutes before they were shot down. And although we made it, was that sacrifice really necessary? Like, for all those men to have died?
If you're someone that's got to plan the war, you've got to make sure that your soldiers will be safe, well, some of them. If you do something and it's wrong, that's so many lives on your conscience.
At Tateville, it kind of shocked me to see like all the names on up and down the walls, and that's all the people that haven't got graves because they would have been blown like to pieces.
What I think is that the weapons they used, like what they were doing is they're not just killing people, they're kind of like making fear. I mean, when you get hit by a grenade, it's like explosion, you know, you've been blown to bits. Your arm could be over there, your leg over there, you know.
At Tateville, I felt very shocked to find one of my great-granddad's names. I feel kind of sad that one of my family members was like blown to pieces and was never found and had to go through all that horror.
War must have affected the communities really bad, you know. One day you'd be seeing like your best friend, the next day they'd be telling you they're going off to war. The next time you'd hear they've been like shot to death. Like, you knew those people a couple like months ago, and now you found out they just died and nobody really knows what happened to them. Nowadays, like modern war, that still goes on. Still people aren't coming home, people aren't seeing their families anymore, people have lost their sons and their daughters.
It's a long, long way to the forest, but my heart is right there. Private Cook is a funny little codger with a smile, a funny...
The first place we went to on day 3 was Essex Farm, which was a cemetery, and it had bunkers where it's like a hospital.
This is where one of the biggest symbols of war is. This is the place where John McCrae wrote Flanders Field. When I first thought about poppies, I think of the war, but I don't really know why I think of the war. It's just that's like you're told that that's to do it. But then you understand that he's been through so much dead bodies and blood and everything. I don't know how he took it. And then he looks out on the field and he sees that the poppies have been sprouting up where all the dead soldiers were.
it was quite an emotional place to visit, because Jim, our tour guide, he brought us to this grave, and the boy on it was only 15 when he was killed, and it just made me think that I'm 15 and most of my friends are 15, and it would just be horrible for me for one of them to just get killed.
When I was standing in front of his grave, I felt kind of shocked. I don't think I could imagine myself being so keen to get into the army.
If you look at a grave like that and it's got a wee boy who's only 15, why they still want to keep having wars when people that young are getting killed?
If you forget those men that have died fighting for you, what have they died for if nobody remembers what they were fighting for?
It's important to remember people because they've given up so much for the war, and also so we don't make the same mistakes again.
You want to look to the past and see how you could change the future.
It's important that we still remember because people are still dying.
It never was worth a while. Oh, pack up, get troubles in your old kit bag and smile.
Clontarmy's on is a memorial for the Hearts players that signed up for the army when they had a chance of winning the league, but they signed up for the army and 7 from their first team died. Me and my friend Turkey, we put our scarves up. We got a Hibs scarf and a Hearts scarf, tied it together and put it on the monument. I'm a Hibs fan, but the differences between football teams seem really small when human lives are being lost.
Smile, smile, smile.
90% of the graves at Polkapelle Cemetery are marked known unto God.
Known unto God means that they don't have a name for the body.
They were unknown soldiers. We all tried to imagine what the soldier would have looked like his hair, his day job, his family, and we laid a poppy at the grave of this unknown soldier.
Placing the poppy and imagining the person, it was like this grave had come to life. It was a person now, and it made me think about what that person had suffered.
The German cemetery did feel a bit different, it just felt really depressing.
The British cemeteries were supposed to resemble an English garden with big white gravestones and flowers and stuff, whereas in the German one it was just a black marble, I think it was, plaque on the ground.
I felt as sad as I did in the British cemetery because they didn't want to fight. Some of them were made to fight. And it doesn't matter if they're British or German.
The difference between the dead British soldier and the dead German soldier is there isn't really much of a difference because once you're dead, you're kind of dead.
One day, Mickey O'Shea out in a trench somewhere, so brave, having a shave, trying to part his hair.
The only couple of reasons I would go to war is if I thought my family and my place was in trouble, there was a danger, you could be invaded and treated not like humans.
There should always be a solution to something instead of war, but you just need to find it.
I don't think anybody wants to go to war even now. People who are fighting against British soldiers, I don't think they want to be doing that. They want to protect their country and we want to protect ours.
I think the only way you could end wars was if nobody had different thoughts, if everybody fought the same. I think that would be the only way you'd end it, because it's when people think differently and people have different views and they clash, people will join sides and that's when it gets bigger, and bigger, and people hurt each other over small things and then it just snowballs.
I don't know how we could stop wars, but I think communicating could be a big help.
If I was a mum and my son was away out fighting in Afghanistan right now, just sitting waiting on a letter to say that he was missing or whatever, I don't think I could imagine it.
Say if it was a mother who had one son and he died in the war, it means that she wouldn't have any more family, she wouldn't have any grandkids, any great-grandkids. If one soldier dies, then say 20 other people wouldn't be here. The last place that we went to for the tour was the Menin Gate, and that's a place where at 8 o'clock every single night they play the last post just to remember every single soldier that fought and died.
You're surrounded by all these names and it's like they're watching you, like the dead soldiers.
It would have been completely different if I went before, on the first day, because I never knew nothing about the war really and what happened and why names were on walls and everything. But because it was the last day, it really hit home.
After we had the main ceremony at the Menin Gate, we had our own private ceremony. I'm pretty sure that we were all thinking about our own personal soldier.
We placed 2 wreaths that we had written down a message on. It was extremely emotional.
We went to a cemetery and we had our own ceremony. My friend Ollie, he said a speech and it was really touching.
I felt very proud about having our own ceremony.
It was quite an emotional time for everyone.
That's just Capsicum. You can't think what day it is with that blinking row going on.
I think the battlefield trip, like the battlefields made me understand stuff. Like when you hear stuff in the news now about soldiers being killed in Iraq and that, you know, it makes you think more. You think about your life and you think, oh God, no another day of school, but then you think whatever you're going through, it can't be any worse than being bullets flying over your head.
All the problems I think I've got are nothing compared to what some of the soldiers back then had, and it's just made me think a lot more about things that are going on in the world. Like I think about it like almost every day.
I definitely feel my life's changed after the battlefields tour. I feel quite angry about war. I don't think it should ever really happen.
I think the battlefields trip made me think a lot about stuff I do and take for granted.
I knew that it'd be emotional, but didn't think it'd be as emotional as it actually was. Like right now, I'm not going into the trenches and knowing that I'm going to die within a year. I know that I've got my whole life ahead of me.
I went there thinking that I wasn't going to cry and that nothing would matter, but now I've came back and I admit I did cry, and it's changed my life because I see things in a different view now.
Up to your waist in water, up to your eyes in slush, using the kind of language that makes the sergeant blush. Who wouldn't join the army? That's what we all inquire. Don't be pity the poor civilian sitting by the fire. Oh!